Today we're wrapping up our series on how do we love, and how do we love like God loves. I think we kind of concluded that being a Christian or following Christ really comes down to one thing, and that's really learning and challenging ourselves to learn how to love the way that Jesus loved while Jesus was on this earth. How do we love ourselves the way that God loves us? How do we love ourselves with grace and with mercy? To see ourselves more than what we do on this earth, but more about how God views us as a precious gift to be used in a way that God chooses. How do we love our family? And that helps us by understanding that our family are those who do the will of God. And as long as we include larger family, God's family, as a part of our family, then that helps us put our issues in our own little families a little bit more in perspective, that we can continue to live the life that God calls us to lead. And how do you love your enemies? I think one of the things we talked about there is that God expects us to be neighbor, not to be enemies. And so it's important for us to learn how to love people unconditionally, regardless of who they are. And when we choose not to love, then we become the enemy. And so how do we love our enemy is not allowing ourselves to be the enemy. That God's constantly telling us through the words of Jesus that we need to respond to people out of mercy, not to choose who's a good neighbor, who's our enemy, who deserves and who doesn't deserve. That our responsibility is always to love, just like Jesus did, regardless of their background, regardless of who they are. Another way that we talked about last week was talking about how do you love God's kingdom over our own personal kingdoms that we build on this earth, or even a better question is how can we build our kingdom under God's kingdom? Because God's kingdom, as we talked about, is a kingdom of abundance. That God always says there's more than enough, more than plenty, whether it's in this world or in our own homes. There's always enough to go around. But our own personal kingdom is always a kingdom of scarcity. We always think that we don't have enough. We need to do more. We need to hold on to things and without letting go or distributing those different types of things. To love God's kingdom is to understand that God has given us plenty. And when we choose to give openly and freely as we're capable, then we begin to live in God's kingdom and build our kingdom within that as well. Today we're talking about how do we love our neighbor. And the question we ask is, who in the world is our neighbor? And if we looked at what Jesus said in one of his stories in the Gospel of Luke, he answers that question. And he answers it with a story that kind of reveals that a neighbor is one who shows mercy. So instead of trying to identify who is a neighbor and who's a good neighbor, who's a bad neighbor, and all those people out there, again, Jesus turns it on us. When we choose to extend mercy to any and all people around this world, we become neighbor. That is what it means to follow Christ, to be neighbor to one another. And so we get this out of the 10th chapter of Luke. But even in the last words of Jesus that he spoke in the Gospel of Matthew, he echoes those same words. As he comes back to be with the disciples, he tells them to go and be neighbor to the world, to go and love and to show mercy, to extend mercy to people. Even in our reading today in the Gospel of John in the 21st chapter, the very last words that he shares, even with Peter. Remember, Peter's the one who denied him 3 times. Peter's the one who ran from him when he should have been there the whole time. And so we hear these words of Jesus as he looks again to John, or to Peter in the book of John, and reminds him of what he is supposed to do. And when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And Peter said to him, "Yes, Lord. You know that I love you." And Jesus replied, "Feed my lambs." A second time Jesus said to Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Then tend to my sheep." And Jesus said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, You know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wish. But when you grow old, you'll stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go. And Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to Peter, follow me. Following Christ obviously has this many challenges of going places that we may not want to go or understand why we do the things that we do. This summer, we had 20 people fly south around a few thousand miles to Ecuador, and we were sent on a trip to be neighbor to our good friends in the village of Puerto Grande in the Chota Valley. This is the 7th year, it's hard to believe, that we have been working with our Ecuadorian family. And it is a great, great joy to be on all those trips, with the exception of one, and to see all the progress and the growth that takes place in this village from day one, not just with the people of Pursue, but to be able to watch the people who go as missionaries, to see things differently, to grow in their own life. We usually take a lot of first-timers with us, and they're kind of the most fun to watch. And you're going to hear a couple of reflections of that, because first-timers always go in not knowing what to expect. They hear stories, but they're always taking a different direction than what they expected to take. And so we're going to hear from some first-timers today, some of the reflections on their trip, but also we also have a couple of veterans who have gone since 2009. So we're going to hear from a couple of them. The first one we're going to listen to is going to be Carol. Carol did a PowerPoint for us, and she's going to share some things that she was able to capture this time around.
Good morning. This bridge is to some people just a bridge, but this was my 5th trip to the valley, and I couldn't wait to see this bridge, because this is a footbridge that connects us to the village of Pursue, and you have to cross it by foot. It's almost become a sacred bridge to us. We followed our faith to Pursue Gran, Chota Valley, Ecuador, hoping to be his hands and his voice, and that we would see the face of God and hear his voice. In August of 2012, the work was begun in the future trade room and on the roof for the future computer room. For Tom Porter, Andy Poole, Earl Gant, Jarrett Freeman, Sam Couch, Robert Goodrich, your near-death experiences on the roof were not without result. There are no railings on the stairs, but the computer rooms are finished. The shop is ready for equipment, and we saw hope in the progress that the villagers had made in the projects at hand. Though railings are overrated, they have air conditioners in the computer rooms. On the days when I go to the office, it's a nice building with a desk, a chair, heat in the cold months, air in the hot months. How long would we last in this office? This is Maria. On a home visit, she proudly took us to her office. She's one of the women who received a $250 loan from Fidice and used it on her fields. Every day she goes to these fields, cleans the weeds out, and with the use of only that hoe, she routes irrigation ditches 5 rows at a time for 15 minutes at a time, and then closing them off and opening for the next 5 rows. She does this day in and day out. and hopes to make $1,200 this year with her fields. Considering the average Ecuadorian income is $300 a month, she falls short, but we experience both faith and hope through Maria. Realizing we have some tough manual labor jobs here in the U.S. as well, how many in this country would stand all day long with no AC, no chair, no complaining, and hand clean those bags of beans for $6 a bag? We saw progress in that the village has 3 convenience stores. As frustrating as it is, I haven't been able to ride my bike lately because it has low tires. And every year I worry about what the latest gadget is that I can afford to buy for my grandchildren. On laundry day, the clothes are sorted into piles by color. The task of carrying them to the washing machine, choosing the settings, throwing the soap pot in, and waiting for them to wash before moving them to the dryer, repeat and fold, is such a task. After dinner, Earl and I clean the kitchen and load the dishwasher, a task neither one of us care for, especially if it's full of clean dishes from the night before. We worry about the safety of our children as they get on the yellow bus going to school and coming home. During one of the home visits, I was reminded that a few years ago we had a leak in our roof. We were so upset that it left a stain on the ceiling in the living room. When hosting parties, we all have the desire for everything to be perfect and in place. We hope that our home is found to be welcoming, with a decorative focal point on the coffee table. Usually people come to our homes bearing plates of food or beverages to contribute to the occasion. However, on our home visits, we walked in empty-handed, but we did not leave a single home that way. We were lovingly given gifts of limes and papayas. The bag in this picture holds the biggest papaya we'd ever seen and could have easily fed the family of 7 children and 10 grandchildren of the lady who provided it to us, but instead it fed us the next morning at the hotel. I question whether you or I would have been as generous. And at this point, I also need to say that they were so interested in our lives, and they wanted to know about our world. And all we all told them about was our family. How many children, how many grandchildren. And it made us realize what is really, truly important in our lives. As I said in the beginning, we followed our faith to Pasir. We saw hope for the people in their own progress. We attempted through our work with scrapers, paintbrushes, and goat wrangling, our playtime with the children, and our visits to the village homes to be the hands and voice of God. But instead, we found ourselves on the receiving end of God's voice. Above all that we experienced, we learned about the greatest gift, which is love. We saw the love for each other as those in the village took care of those who couldn't take care of themselves. We saw the love for the village and the pride in the cleanliness of the streets and the park and their homes. We saw that even though they all lack creature comforts that we take for granted, the people of Pasir are rich with love. We saw the love of God, and we did hear his voice, and we saw his face in and through the people of Pasir Grand in the Chota Valley.
Thank you, Carol. I did a couple of interviews with 2 women that followed talked about their experiences in the Chota Valley with Pasir. One is Jerri McDonald, and we're going to hear what she had to say.
I have visited in other places with people that don't have anything. I didn't expect the love, I was so excited because they knew we were coming and how they were all right there to greet us every day. They were right there, all the children and the women were there to greet us, which I thought was just so warm and loving. The way that they just embraced you and hugged you, and that I didn't expect. So that was a nice thing. I left a different person. The people there are just, they're amazing. The children are amazing. Their school is amazing. Just the progress they've made is amazing. That was rewarding to me, is just to know of where they started to where they are now. And even knowing there's so much farther to go, it's rewarding to me to just have a little piece of it, to know that I did something. I mean, they'll have, freshly painted classrooms, when school starts, and that means a lot to them. That was the most rewarding part, is being able to just leave a little piece of me there. It brings me back down to be thankful for what we have, and to appreciate what we have, and not complain about what we don't have, or wish we had more. These people don't ask for anything. They make it on what they've got and try to better themselves, and that's what I want to take away from it, and I want to bring that into my life. That just be thankful every day for what I have. I mean, I was amazed at how little they have, yet how much they offered us. I mean, they gave us their things. They're their food, and that's precious to them, but they gave it away. That's really just what I want people to know, is if you can go and leave something there of you. It changes lives.
One of the great promises I think Jesus tells us is that if we just be neighbor, constantly sharing mercy and giving mercy to people, it's amazing the impact that it has on those around us. You can't expect someone to be a neighbor or a friend or love someone if we choose not to be a neighbor or a friend or to love others. And God always tells us, and Jesus always tells us, that we need to be the ones that step out. We need to be the ones that go and meet. We need to cross the fence, cross the road, cross the country, cross everywhere we go, to be the arms and the feet of Jesus Christ and be mercy to people. And I think that's the neatest impact that we have on the people and the people have on us, is that the fences are gone, and it's just heart-to-heart people. And I think that's the most impactful thing. Nikke Rhodes has a few things she's going to also share with us, because she's also heard stories about this trip. They came away with a different perspective. So we'll hear a few of her stories.
One of the things I was surprised about Pusir was how the women came together and how organized they were and how structured it was and how powerful they were as a unit. That was a pleasant surprise to see, because of course they were the only people in the village during the day when we were there. We didn't get to see many men, but it was neat to see them working together after hearing that in the past they weren't really a community and they were more of a community, and seeing that interaction I thought was really neat. The very first thing they did was start hugging us like we were long-lost friends, and I'd never seen them before. The kids, the women treated us like family, and that was the other thing that I found to be really neat. They were like a live pen pal. They wanted to know about us, and they wanted us to know about them, and they wanted to share their story. This is who I am, this is where I live, these are my 7 kids, this is my dog, or this is my horse. That showed the fun in it, because you get to hug and share the good stuff. We didn't really talk with them about the bad stuff, even though it's there and we're aware of it, but it wasn't about that. It was about trying to help them if we can, but getting to know them.
One of the things I've heard on numerous times is that people were talking about that how uncomfortable they feel about being called missionaries, because in our minds what missionaries are people who go and kind of manipulate other people in different countries. We go and say, here's what's wrong with you, and we're going to go and fix it for you, and we're going to do all this work for you, and we're going to try to see if we can't get you to be baptized so we can get some numbers and measurables so we can go back and get to the States and get our funding. And so that's one of the things that we've changed so much about who we are as missionaries, that our mission is the same mission as Jesus. How many homes did Jesus build? we don't hear him build any houses. We hear him talk about building relationships. And out of those relationships, things happen. And that's the perspective that we take. We have 2 rules when we go to Ecuador. One, we have some tasks that we have to do. And second one, if you have an opportunity to visit, to play, to interact, do it. Everything else just seems to take its place, because building relationships is how it gives people hope for their lives. And so Nikke kind of found this and discovered this to be the truth. And kind of how you do that, you see things just happening. Here's another part of her story.
There's a track when you walk in, and you can see it from Google Earth. And I thought, well, no one's on the track. And so I grabbed 3 little kids. I said, will y'all go run a lap with me? They understood what I meant, and we started running. And one of them reached out and held my hand while we finished circling the track. And here I am, this 40-year-old gringo, running, holding this kid's hand. And then there was Clay. He did it with me so that I wasn't the only lunatic out there, running on the track. It was just so much fun. And then it just looked at us like, I'm not really sure why you wanted to do that, but we did it with you, and that was really cool. But there were so many opportunities like that. One little girl who couldn't have been more than 8 was holding a baby, and I thought, she's probably tired of holding this kid. I'd like to hold him for a minute. So I asked, can I hold the baby? And she let me, and he didn't cry. He looked at me a little funny, and you could tell there was a little tiny quizzical look on his face. Like, am I going to like this person or not, It was very welcoming. But welcoming as friends, not welcoming as, not cracking the whip, get back to painting. It was, let's get to know these people. Let's make them our family. And if you don't hold them, or you don't hug them, or you don't talk to them, it's a lot harder to consider them part of your family. And then at the very last minute, seeing you hugging Oberlisa, I must have taken 50 pictures of you just standing there with your head on her, top of her head, hugging her. And I thought, wow, there aren't words to describe how moving it was.
When mercy is shared, when being neighbor to others, and being loved for being the reason for your presence, then you just seem to naturally find ways to help people in their times of need, or discover what it is that they need for their life. And so then helping becomes very pure. Loving becomes very natural. Being a part of them is very natural.
The animals were the most shocking to me, because they are all either sick or hurt. And, we love our animals so much that half of them are treated better than the people of Pusir. For an agrarian society, they don't have cows. They only have a few goats, and the goats that they have, they don't know the proper way to care for them, because no one's ever taught them. And so when Dr. Paul Lowe went in and examined them and tried to teach them about health benefits to keeping certain goats away from other goats, to me that was such an amazing piece of information that he could give them that got them further down the road. It wasn't charity. It wasn't, oh, we feel sorry for you. It's, okay, you have a goat, and this goat has parasites, and so this is what you need to do about it. Of all the ways that we could help them, we can build buildings that stand for years and years, but to give them that education and to encourage them to continue with the animals, I thought that was one of the biggest gifts that I saw given that week. I think it's worth people's time. I think it's worth people's money. I think it's worth their effort. And I think that anyone who's even slightly curious, that curiosity means that they should go.
Every year I work in Ecuador, there's always new challenges and new creations and new understanding, not just for the people in Pusir, but also for us, and the things that we're striving to do with the people there. Our first visit, I remember very well, in 2000, in February, there wasn't one person who graduated from high school in their 500-year history of that village. That's pretty astounding. But they continue to work, and our trip has given them a lot of hope and a lot of encouragement. In this last trip, the community center was even transformed into more of a senior citizen center. And so we happened to walk in and look at what the people were doing, and there was all these elderly people there, and there's some pictures up there you see of us dancing. They love to dance, and it's okay to dance there. You don't look good, but it doesn't matter. And so you dance. There's a computer center there. But it was kind of interesting because the ladies came in to teach them arts and crafts. They never did arts and crafts before. You know what that was. And a lot of those folks, if not all of them, learned how to write their name for the very first time. Now, I want you to just imagine that. So in 2009, we had 0 people graduate from high school, and we have this community center built so they can learn to do things that they should have learned in preschool. And to see all these people come together with a lot of hope. And if our presence has been anything, it's just given them a lot of hope that comes from a genuine love of being neighbor to people. A love that's always coming back, and a love that always returns, that never gives up on them. And that has been the most eye-opening thing that we've ever seen for that. But it also helps us understand what the concept of what it really means to love and to be loved and what's most important to us. It's given them a lot of confidence that tells them that their life matters. They can do things with their life, that they're capable of doing exactly what God dreamed their life to be. Every year we see growth. Every year we see new confidence. Every year we see new challenges that come from the growth. And this year is no different. For the first time that we have been there, we are seeing kids graduating from high school. We had 7 graduates this year from high school. And so we're confronted with a new problem. And this is fantastic. How are they going to go to college? If their parents are making anywhere between $100 and $300 a month, even though Ecuador College is not expensive, that's nearly impossible for them to go. So there are a lot of kids that want to go that cannot go. And so we are creating a special opportunity for that. I say we, but more this idea comes from my daughter Keylen, who has been going to Ecuador since 2009 and grew up with most of these kids that you see in the video. So she's going to share a few things.
My name's Keylen. I've been going since 2009, and I have grown up with the kids of Pusier. And every trip I play with the kids, whether it's sidewalk chalk, sports, or group projects. And they are starting to want to go to college, and it's not expensive, but like my dad said, it's nearly impossible. So I would like to do something about it, and we want to put together a scholarship program and want to fund it with a golf tournament. Thanks to Richard and Nancy Stewart, we can have this tournament on Monday, October 12th at Canyon West Golf Course. But I also want to raise money for something very special to me. My sister was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis last December. MS is a disease where the immune system eats away the protective covering of the nerves, and it makes it hard for the brain to send signals to the rest of the body. It has varying symptoms, anywhere from mild discomfort to complete disability. Medications can ease the attacks and slow down the disease. Other treatments can control symptoms and improve the quality of life, but there's no cure. Half the money raised from this golf tournament will go to the Ecuador's fund, and the other half will go to the MS Society. If you would like to be supportive of the Ecuador and MS research, after worship we have a table outside for information on the golf tournament and about future Ecuador trips. Thank you.
In Matthew, in the Great Commission, Jesus says, the first word of the Great Commission is go. He says, go out into the world and share the message of love and hope with the world. Keylen has organized a golf tournament to answer God's call in her life. So what is God calling you to do? How are you called to go and share the message of love and hope with the world?